An old proverb says, "He cannot be a gentleman that loveth not a dog." Hello, this is Nelson Olmsted. Louis Bromfield has earned an important reputation in this country, not only for his writing, but for his love of the land. With that goes his love of animals, especially dogs. Recently, one of his favorite dogs died, and he wrote a tribute to him, which I'd like to present today. If you own a dog or just like dogs, I know you'll like and understand Louis Bromfield's Farewell to a Friend. I'd been fishing for 3 days among the islands of Lake Erie, escaping just ahead of a great equinoctial storm which shut the islands off from the mainland for 3 days. Friends drove me from Catawba down to the farm with the rising wind and the towering black clouds just behind us all the way. The big house had never looked pleasanter, nor the farm more green than in the sulphur yellow light of the approaching storm. Always, when I've been away, I am greeted as the car comes up the lane by my wife and a troop of dogs. There were always Prince and Baby, Gina and Folly, the 4 boxers, Dusky the cocker, and Joe the border collie. Once there had been the great and venerable Rex, father of all the boxers, and little Patsy, the black and liver-colored cocker, and Midge, the boxer pup. It's always the dogs who give the signal of my approach, and my wife, recognizing it, comes down the path from the house. On that wild September evening, the arrival of the car was heralded by the rush of dogs, but I saw at once that 2 things were wrong. Prince was not with the dogs, leading them as he always did, and my wife didn't appear. Instead, it was Tom who came across the lawn. Without even greeting me, he said, "Mr. B, Prince is dead." "But dead?" I said. "What happened?" "Well, he was coughing badly, and we sent him up to Doc's. He died during the night." I knew now why my wife hadn't appeared. She couldn't face telling me because she knew about Prince and me. So Tom had been delegated, and it was hard for him, so hard he didn't even accompany the news with a prelude of a greeting. My friends expressed sorrow at the news, and I was grateful, but they couldn't know how I felt. I asked them in for a drink before they drove off to Columbus. My wife joined us and acted as if nothing at all had happened. We talked a while, and my friends left, eager to continue their race against the storm. And when they'd gone, my wife looked at me without speaking, and I said, "I think I'll go and have a look at the farm before dark." And she said, "I think that's a good idea." It was always Prince who went everywhere with me in the Jeep. He loved it partly, I think, because it was open and he could catch every scent in the breeze as we drove, and partly because in the Jeep we went to the wildest parts of the farm where there were always squirrels and rabbits and woodchucks to chase. And now, as I climbed in, Prince's brother, Baby, jumped quickly to the seat beside me. I wasn't going to look over the farm. I was going to the place where all of us go instinctively when we're troubled. I was going to the pastures of the Ferguson place, high above the valley, just beneath the sky. My wife knew where I was going. Prince had slept at the foot of my bed since he was a fat puppy. Never once in the 8 years of his life had he been absent from his accustomed place. If I moved across the room to another chair, he moved with me and lay down at my feet. People came to say that I didn't own Prince. He owned me. And now, as I drove up the long, lonely lane through the woods, his brother Baby was beside me, and something curious happened. Halfway up the lane, he leaped into my lap and began to lick my ear, exactly as Prince had done so many times when we set off alone together in the Jeep, as if the pleasure was too great to be borne. It was exactly as if Baby knew. We reached the high farm just as the clouds of a storm were blacking out the last rays of the setting sun. There on the green pasture, the Holstein heifers and Pee-wee the bull were grazing quietly. When I turned off the motor and climbed out of the Jeep to lie on the grass, followed by Baby, the cattle came up, 1 or 2 at a time, to stand there, very close, watching us. Baby did what Prince had always done. He sat close to me, his back against my chest, to protect me from the peril of the docile heifers. This was a place where Prince had come with me countless times to sit in the evening, looking down in the valley. It was all just the same. Despite the oncoming storm, the evening seemed quiet but for the churning of the great black clouds, touched at moments by the crimson and gold lights of the setting sun. The wood shut out the rising wind, and the only sound was the soft swishing, crunching of the heifers and the bull as they ate their way along the blue grass and white clover. Then there was a wild clap of thunder. I heard myself half thinking, half saying, "It's all right, kid. I'm coming back. Don't worry." And I thought, that's silly. But somehow it made a difference. It was what I always said to him when I went away on a trip. He always knew the signs. He knew what a suitcase meant. He grew worried and miserable when I put on store clothes to go into town for just a few hours. So I'd always say, "It's all right, kid. I'm coming back. Don't worry." And always when I'd come back, I'd say, after I'd recovered from the first affectionate assault of welcome, "You see, kid, I told you I'd come back, and I did." Prince was a big and handsome dog, the child of Rex, a noble father, and Regina, a mother with an immense store of feminine wisdom, calm and poise. Baby, too, is their child, but from a different litter than Prince. Baby is a year younger, and no two dogs could be less alike. For Baby has always been clown and ham. He holds long conversations in a variety of barks, whines, and growls. He taught himself to dive off the high platform at the pond, and he cannot resist climbing into an empty wheelbarrow for a ride. He drinks soda pop from a bottle and water straight from the faucet. He developed all these tricks and more without being taught. But Prince was different. Indeed, he was different from any of the 50 or more dogs I've had in my lifetime. He was different first because he was a boxer, and boxer owners will know what I mean by that. But he was also a king, even among boxers. Above all, he was a good companion. To drive with him over the farm or to take him with me across the fields and woods was like having the company of a great friend who was intelligent and amusing. When I walked 3 or 4 miles, he would joyously run 10 or 15. But in all his excursions, he kept returning to me again and again to tell me what a beautiful morning it was, or how he'd treat a squirrel. Sometimes he would return proudly with a woodchuck to show me, and would insist on carrying it all the way home. Like all boxers, he was clever with his paws, using them with dexterity, almost like hands. Most of the doors in the big house have French door handles, and these he turned easily. But a round doorknob was vulnerable to him, too. He used both paws to turn it. He went from room to room in the house, and at the front entrance, he would open the screen door and hold it open while he turned the knob of the inner door. Once, his cleverness nearly caused disaster, which might have ended in the death of himself and his wise old mother. I'd left them inside the car on a slope, above the deep pond below the big house. I had planned to return quickly, but a long-distance telephone call detained me, and temporarily I forgot Prince and Gina, still waiting in the car. And when at last I was free to return, I stepped out of the house just in time to see the big car with the 2 dogs inside moving down the steep slope toward the deep waters of the pond. It was the dogs I thought of, not the car. I ran down the slope and arrived at the pond just in time to see the car sinking slowly beneath the surface. Fully dressed, I went into the water, opened the car door, and dragged them both out under the water. They swam ashore and shook themselves, seemingly unconcerned over what had happened. It didn't take me long to divine what had happened. The car was heavy. The emergency brake never held it properly. So, on leaving them, I'd put the car in second gear and turned the wheels against the nearby bank. Prince had grown impatient and tried to open the door to get out to find me. In doing so, he'd put one paw on the gear shift, pulling it out of second, and at the same time, turning the wheels away from the bank. The rest was easy. The car simply rolled into the pond. Well, 5 or 6 dogs sleep in my bedroom. It's on the left of the garden, and it has 2 doors, which Prince opened easily, sometimes for himself and sometimes for the others. When the coon hunting season opened, life at night in my bedroom was not placid, and sleep was interrupted. For after midnight, when the neighboring boys started running their hounds, the sound of baying drifted down from the ridge across the ravine. The dogs in my bedroom knew there were strangers on what they considered their territory. With a whoop and a halloo, they were off, led by Prince, who opened the door. Then, for an hour or two, all hell broke loose as the boxers, with Dusky, the cocker spaniel, trailing them, set out after the coon hounds, driving them out of the valley. And once the hounds were clear of the boxers' land, the boxers all returned, with Prince leading to open the door for them to enter. Prince was a sociable dog and a great welcomer. Like all boxers, he loved picnics and parties, and after the first uproar of barking had died away, He would welcome and say a few words to every member of the arriving party. Boxers are ferocious in appearance, but they have the hearts of big babies. Like all boxers, Prince was wonderful with children, and on the farm and among visitors, there are always many children of all sizes. Instinctively, a boxer will take care of children. I've seen the little fellows pinch and ride and bedevil the boxers and even take bones from them without coming to any harm. And when the assaults become unendurable, the boxer will simply walk away with no loss of dignity. Prince had many friends from all over the world, and whenever or wherever I met them, they always asked, "How is Prince?" For weeks before he died, he had seemed melancholy and looked a little thin, but I thought that was only the hot weather. And then 2 days before he died, he began to cough violently, and my wife sent him up to Doc Wadsworth's. 36 hours later, he was dead of a hemorrhage, which couldn't be stopped. If I couldn't have been with him myself, I was glad he was with Doc Wadsworth and his wife and sister-in-law, for they feel as I do about animals, and particularly about boxers. When Doc comes to the farm, they all rush out and leap all over him. On 2 occasions, they've knocked him flat with their affection. I'm glad Doc was with him and gave him something to keep him asleep. But I wish I'd been there to hold his head on my knee and talk to him. As I lay there in the grass of the pasture, Baby turned suddenly and again began licking my ear violently and quickly. And out of the threatening sky, the storm of the equinox broke. The heifers and Pee-wee took to a sheltering thicket, and Baby and I climbed back into the Jeep to drive down the rough lane home through a wild wind and a driving rain. I know that much of what I thought that day and much that I'm writing now sounds sentimental, and much of it is. And so I'm a sentimentalist. And so what? It is inevitable that anyone who likes and understands animals should be a sentimentalist. I think, too, that such people sometimes find in animals, and especially dogs, consolation and sympathy in time of hurt which no human, however close, can ever bring them. And there's much truth in the sentimentality about animals, much which brings a special warmth and satisfaction in living, and a clue to much that is part of understanding and of God. Some people will perhaps not understand at all what I'm writing about, and others will know instinctively and rightly. I have a feeling that Prince has gone to join old Rex and the charming, frivolous little boxer Midge, who was like a ballet dancer, and little Patsy the cocker, who used to act as sitter for old Gina whenever she had puppies, and Dash the Don Juan of all Scotties. I have a feeling that I'll see them all someday, and that as they rush down the path to welcome me with Prince in the lead, I'll be able to say to him, "You see, kid, I told you I'd come back." And I did.
You have heard a tribute to his dog by Louis Bromfield entitled Farewell to a Friend. Now, here is Nelson Olmsted.
Louis Bromfield is best known for his novels, The Green Bay Tree, Mrs. Parkington, Malabar Farm. I hope you've enjoyed his tribute to his dog today. This is Nelson Olmsted saying goodbye and good reading.
Nelson Olmsted has presented another short story from the world of literature. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.